So you're thinking about getting a navel piercing, but you're not quite sure which is going to work best for you, the floating navel or the more standard or traditional navel. Well, I'm going to give you some things to think about. Coming up next on Pros and Cons by a Piercer, Season 2, Episode number 64. For those that are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. I hope you're enjoying the videos. Hope you're finding them helpful, but you might not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. What we're going to talk about today is navel piercings. Now, there's two primary types of this. There's a standard navel piercing, which is probably the most popular and most common, where the piercing is done more outside the navel, usually done with a curved barbell that has a large ball on the bottom and a smaller ball on the top. This has been pretty much the standard for about the last 25, 26 years. In recent years, there's been a lot of talk in kind of this new development of things called a floating navel. Now, the idea with the floating navel is it's done more inside the navel, usually with a disc on the bottom, and then there's a single end on the top. Then that's the only part that's visible. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through through 5 different things to kind of give you an idea of maybe what is going to work best for you, starting with anatomy, placement, healing, jewelry, and living with the piercing. Let's start off with anatomy. Anatomy is very diverse when it comes to navels. It's probably, even though it's the most common, or for years was one of the most common piercings that we did, it was a challenge because you're dealing with so many different types of anatomy. Now, if you're looking at the floating navel, what is the best candidates for that is someone that has a deeper navel, usually those that have more of an hourglass where it curves outward or inward around the navel. Also people that are a little bit larger, and also those that have that line where it almost folds in half when you sit down. With those situations, you're going to be better off with a floating navel. Traditional navels, that one, you can even do it on people that have the anatomy I just described. It really depends on the person. However, the number one best candidate, I guess, is somebody that has a very flat stomach, usually a very shallow navel, because of the angle that the piercing's done at. It's usually not done very deep inside the navel, but it kind of creates more of a flat area so that the jewelry doesn't get caught as often and can be inside the navel. Now let's talk about placement. With the floating navel, it's done kind of basically the angle we used to do them when we did them all with rings, back when we didn't know better. The easiest way to describe this is we would pull down the tissue, would take 2 fingers on each side of the navel, and it would create kind of a triangle where that loose lobe of tissue would separate a little bit from that more connected tissue. Then we would mark it, and we would go dead center right at the top of that. Another way of kind of judging this would be to take your index finger, put it inside your navel, and pinch down with your thumb. If you roll your finger back and forth, you'll notice there's loose tissue there, kind of like a lobe, like an ear or whatever. So we would do the navel piercing at the same angle we would a lobe, straight through, 90 degrees. So it's more inside your navel, and the top hole, instead of coming out at a weird angle, comes out almost straight out of the body. Now, the standard navel is done a little differently. It is usually done more outside the navel, with the hole on the inside being further out and closer to the edge, and the top hole being higher on the body, almost into that more connected tissue. The reason for this is that we want the jewelry to sit kind of flat. We don't want it to sit this way or this way. We want it to kind of hide. We want, ideally, the perfect navel in this case would be one where if you run your hand over the top of your navel, you can feel just whatever that bottom ball is just touching the palm of your hand. So it just fits perfectly in there. Now let's talk about healing. Healing the floating navel has kind of an advantage from the standpoint of you only really have one piece of the jewelry visible and one piece that can have contact with stuff. It's not as readily going to get caught on things because you don't have 2 balls. Basically, it makes it a little bit easier. The other thing is when you bend over, move, and etc., the jewelry may shift less because there isn't that possibility of putting pressure on that ball or end inside your navel and causing the jewelry to shift or move during the healing process and cause discomfort and prolonged healing. Now, the traditional, because it's more outside the body and has more contact, is going to be possibly more prone to problems. You have two balls there. Also, you have that effect that if you bend over and your navel kind of shrinks up a little bit, kind of folds, that's going to cause that jewelry to shift or move when you bend over to pick something up or when you sit down. Now let's talk about jewelry. Your choices are a little bit broader with the floating navel than they would be with the standard. The reason being is that you can wear a ring in this if you really wanted to, because it's more inside the navel and it's not going to just stick straight out and just ask to get caught on absolutely everything. The other thing is that you can wear J bars, which is a J-shaped piece of jewelry that where you could have a ball or a gem on the bottom that is very visible, so you give kind of that same effect that we all know with navel piercings with the two balls. With the standard piercing, you're pretty much stuck with curved barbells. Rings are just not going to work well because they're going to protrude so far from the body, they're going to constantly have contact and cause issues, even well after the piercing is well healed. You're kind of stuck with that same style. Now, don't feel bad about it because there is a huge amount of different variety of type of quality jewelry that you can wear in a navel because it's still a very popular piercing. Now, let's talk about living with the piercing. Floating navels, like I said earlier when I was talking about healing, because it has a little less contact with things, and you only really have one point of contact, and you also have all that extra room in your navel, is probably going to be a little easier to deal with in the long run. However, especially with threadless jewelry, when those larger pieces, like the really cool gem settings that we like, the clusters and the shape stuff and shooting stars and all that stuff, if it gets, it's going to be more likely to get caught on things. So it really depends on the style of jewelry you choose. The thing is that, and probably one of the most common questions is, regardless if it's a floating or traditional navel, I don't advise wearing jeans against it even after it heals. If they come in contact directly with the piercing, it's going to cause issues with jeans or any other pants that you wear. The standard is probably going to be a little bit more difficult from the standpoint of that ball being inside there. Like I mentioned with healing, when you bend over, sit down, you're going to have a lot more movement than you would have otherwise. Sometimes with some people, when they sit down, it puts pressure on that bottom ball to the point where it sticks out or protrudes from the top, just kind of making it a little bit more likely to get caught on things. But other than that, you should be fine with either or. Now, do you have either a standard or a floating navel? Or maybe you've had both of them. What has your experience been like with them? Make a comment. Till next time, you're hoping piercing still with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care. We'll see you in the next video.